One of the more interesting things about Dolby Atmos music production is the lack of a dedicated mastering step. And the reason for that is that all the sound objects are stored as individual objects together with the position data. And the actual final experience is then created by the consumer device, sort of by mixing everything on the fly in real time. Now, this changes the way we produce music quite a bit. Mastering sort of becomes almost a little bit like mixing. Instead of massaging the final output, what you're really doing is you're making sure that the individual sound objects sound well together. And that provides a challenge for many of us. Now, fortunately, there is one plugin that promises to change all of that. It will give us a virtual mastering bus. And that is what I want to look at today, if that particular solution is something we might use in Dolby Atmos music production. Now, with that being said, first of all, hello everybody. My name is Michael Wagner. I teach at the Antoinette Westphal College of Media Arts and Design at Drexel University in Philadelphia. And on this channel, I talk about digital media, game design, and spatial audio. Now, if any of those things interest you, please consider subscribing and don't forget to press the like button because of YouTube algorithms. If you have any comments or questions, please use the comment section below or join my Discord server. Invite link in the description below. And with that being said, let's get ready to do some Dolby Atmos music mastering. The plugin I'm talking about is HoRNet SAMP, which was released only a few days ago. In case you're not familiar with HoRNet plugins, it's a small Italian developer that produces quite interesting and very innovative plugins. And one thing is particularly interesting is the fact that they are not using any copy protection whatsoever. So you buy the plugin and you can install it as often as you want. There is no license, no serial number, no challenge response, no dongle, no nothing. So it's very, very convenient. Now the plugin comes currently in at 60 euros. I at some point bought the entire bundle, the everything bundle, and that's why I get a 40% discount on every plugin they release. So for me it was only 36 euro, but if you don't have that everything plugin, everything bundle, the price is 60 euros. But you can demo it, so download the demo and play around with it, and you will see it's actually quite interesting. So let's get right into using it. But before I do that, let's first have a look at the project that I'm going to use for this purpose. Now I'm going to use Nuendo. So let's just check out what I have here. Now, in order to explain what I have here, let me just give you a little bit of a background. Essentially, what I did is I took a couple of MIDI files that I had in a pack that I bought some time ago, and I turned them into audio files and put them together to form a little loop that's going to be the basis for this Dolby Atmos project. So let's just have a listen on how that sounds. So essentially nothing particularly spectacular, but it's going to be good enough for us for this particular project. Now this once again is the Dolby Atmos project in Nuendo. So there are a couple of things we need to know. Well, first of all, we've obviously make sure that we have everything set up as a Dolby Atmos project. So there is a 7.1.4 Atmos bus, and this 7.1.4 Atmos bus holds the Dolby Atmos renderer. The Dolby Atmos renderer shows the Dolby Atmos bed. The Dolby Atmos bed is its own bus, and a couple of those tracks are essentially routed into this bed. I'm going to come to that back in a second. And then I have 5 individual tracks that are routed as objects into the Dolby Atmos renderer. Because they are all stereo tracks, they are showing up as 10 individual objects in the Dolby Atmos renderer. The other thing that I did is I made sure I have essentially the 2 tracks that are routed into the Dolby Atmos bed. The bed really kind of holds all the percussion instruments in this particular production. And I really have 2 tracks. So one is just a kick and the other one is just some additional percussive instruments. So let's just have another listen with the Dolby Atmos renderer enabled here. So as you can see, the first 20 channels are active here, and there's a little bit going on in pretty much all of the individual channels. So essentially, in order to achieve that, what I did is I took the and let me just kind of just solo the drum track here, or let's solo the bed. So this is essentially the bed. The bed once again consists out of the drums. The drums really is just a kick. That's just a kick. And the only thing I really did is I brought the kick in a little so that we have a little bit of action going on in the center channel, and I also added a little bit of LFE just so that we have something in the LFE channel. And the second part of this drum loop is some additional percussive instruments. And in order to make sure that we have all the channels active, what I did is I just put that to the back. So the additional percussive instruments are playing in the back and actually on top, so that all the individual speakers are active. Right. And then I have essentially the additional objects. The objects contain a pad, then some progressive, and then the main synths really, with some additional layering going on. There's an additional sitar that's playing in the background, and then a bass. Together it sort of makes this little track. Now the way you would render the final output is through the Dolby Atmos renderer, meaning that you would export a Dolby Atmos master file through the Atmos renderer, and that essentially means that you don't really have any dedicated mastering bus. All the individual objects and the pads are routed directly into the renderer, and the renderer then outputs the Dolby Atmos master file, so there isn't really any option for you to do any mastering step. And that essentially means that if I want to make sure that everything sounds well together, I need to do that at the individual track level, and I need to make sure that all the individual objects sound well together. And that can be quite bothersome. Now, it would be nice to have something that allows us to do everything together, and this is where essentially SAMP comes in, and that essentially allows us to create this virtual master bus. So let's have a look on how this virtual master bus actually is set up. The basic idea is that you put one instance of the SAMP plugin onto each individual object track, and these individual instances will then work together so that you control everything from one instance, thereby creating a virtual master bus. So let's just do that. So let's first kind of add one to the pad object here, or to the pad object, I should say. So let's just do HoRNet SAMP. Let's add that here. And while you have it open, let's have a brief look on how that actually looks. Well, first of all, we have the four individual effects. So we have an equalizer, a compressor, a clipper, and a limiter. And this can be rearranged. So if you want to have the compressor before the equalizer, that's fine. So you can just move these things around. And I'm going to come back to them in a second. They're essentially based on some very popular plugins that are provided by HoRNet. So you can buy them individually as well, but they are combined in this particular plugin for here. And on the side here, we have a track list that essentially includes all the individual instances that you have in your Dolby Atmos session. So you can have at most 160 instances, which is more than you actually need, because in a Dolby Atmos project, you have at most 118 actually objects, because you need at least 10 channels for the bed. And you essentially see the individual tracks here listed. Unfortunately, they are numbered, so you can't really see the what kind of number belongs to what track. However, if you hover over the number, you can see essentially the track name listed here, so that will allow us to figure out which one belongs to what track. Now, the first thing we need to do is we need to add this plugin to the other tracks as well. And unfortunately, we need to do that one by one. If we just copied it over, it's not going to work correctly. So let me just add those. So HoRNet SAMP, here we have, and let me just close that again. And one more. Let's close that again. One more. Now, these plugins are technically mono plugins. However, they do work on stereo tracks. And you can use actually the HoRNet SAMP plugin not only for Dolby Atmos projects, so you could actually use them for other projects as well. As long as you have only have mono or stereo tracks, you can essentially kind of control everything from within the HoRNet SAMP plugin. So now that I have all the individual instances set up, I can see them here in the track listing. So if I hover over those numbers, I can essentially see the track name. So this is the instance that belongs to the pad. This is the instance that belongs to the progressive. This is the instance that belongs to the sitar, to the synth, and to the bass. And all these instances are summed up and sent through the effects chain that is listed here, once again being an equalizer, a compressor, a clipper, and a limiter. And that essentially means that I now can control everything from this one instance. So if I want to change the EQ for the entire object, for the entire group of objects, I can do that by just kind of going into that particular instance and changing the EQ. So let's just do that. So now that I have all the individual instances connected to my object tracks, all I really need to do is I need to open one of those instances. It doesn't really matter which one. And then I can essentially see all the individual instances here in the track list. And once again, I see numbers, but if I hover over those numbers, I can see the track name. So this is the pad, this is the progressive, this is the sitar, this is the synth, and this is the bass. And everything that essentially is running through these instances is combined and sent through the effects chain. So if I now change the equalizer, so let's just start the track here. So let's just add an EQ point here. I essentially can change the EQ for all objects simultaneously. And if I open, regardless of what instance I'm opening, I'm going to see the same EQ curve. Now the nice thing about this EQ is, and I invite everybody to just check out the manual and kind of read through everything, because this is actually quite powerful EQ. Just to give you one example, for example, it has here a dynamic option, so you can actually add a dynamic EQ. And it also has some saturation possibilities. So you can also kind of do some saturation. And that essentially allows you to, get rid of that again. And that essentially allows you to control the EQ for all individual objects simultaneously. Now, when it gets to the compressor and the limiter, things get a little bit more complicated, and that is when the sidechain option of this plugin comes in. And to be perfectly honest, it took me a while to really understand how this works, but it actually makes a lot of sense once you get used to it. So let's just check that out. Now, the basic idea is that you have two types of instances here. There are the types. First of all instances contribute to the summation of the signal that is sent through the effects chain. However, some instances are sent through the sidechain, and the sidechain is what drives the compressor. So essentially what I have right now is only the pad is blue, and that essentially means the pad is the only instance that it currently sends sound into that controls essentially the compression. So if I go into the compressor section, for example, the compressor will act or will be driven by whatever sound is coming out of the instance number one. So let's just check that out. Now I can add additional instances to the summation of the sidechain. So if I, for example, want to have a compressor that compresses based on the overall signal, all I need to do is I need to add all instances to this compressor chain, and that will essentially then route everything into the sidechain, and the sidechain will drive the compressor. I can make certain selections. So for example, I can say that only the progressive track should control the compressor. So let's just click all of them. And now it's essentially only the progressive, so that essentially is driving this compressor. Or for example, let's just do one more thing. Let's just do the synth. So essentially, everything is compressed according to the signal that comes out of the synth. And the same is true for the limiter. So if I'm going to the limiter, let's just open the compressor here up a little. The same is true for the limiter. Also, the limiter is based on the sidechain. So whatever is blue here is going to drive the limiter. So if I'm deselecting these and taking them out of the limiter, I can essentially choose which instances are driving the compressor and the limiter. But the effect chain is always going to act on all instances simultaneously. So the blue one here is only those instances that are driving the compression, driving the limiter, but the effect is going to be applied to all sound that is coming out of all individual instances. So let's go back to all. Set that. Obviously I can bypass. Same thing for the compressor. And then I also have the clipper. Now the clipper doesn't really kind of consider any sidechain, so this is just a regular clipper. So it's essentially, if I'm deselecting any of them and changing the sidechain, it's not going to have any effect on the clipping. Couple of things. There's a sync button here that essentially means that I can choose to sync the release time based on the essentially the notes or the kind of the tempo, or I can base it on milliseconds. And then essentially, depending on what of the options you use, there are also kind of different possibilities essentially how to change that. And once again, what HoRNet has done here is they really took the individual plugins that they've produced and kind of thrown them into this one combined plugin. There's one final thing I wanted to point out, that in the Equalizer, essentially the spectrum analyzer is essentially the sidechain. So essentially, if I'm deselecting things here, so I'm changing the sidechain, I'm only going to see what the signal that's coming out of the sidechain. Now this is really everything there is to it. It's actually a fairly simple idea, but fairly powerful and actually pretty useful. There are a couple of things I'd like to point out. First of all, the plugin only works for mono and stereo tracks, so that means that we cannot use it for the bad track. So it would kind of be nice to also be able to control the bed with that plugin, but that's not possible. Let's just see what happens if I add an instance to the bed channel. Now, as I'm doing that, let me demonstrate one more thing, and that is if I, for example, kind of just change, and let's just change the AQ curve here a little. And then let's add an instance of that to our bed channel or to our bed track. So let's close that and let's add an instance to the bed here. Now, the first thing that you will see is that it essentially reset everything. And that's something that you need to be aware of if you're using this plugin, because all these instances are communicating with each other. And whenever you change something on one instance, it changes it on all the other instances as well. That essentially means if you load in a new instance, it's going to reset everything. So the idea is obviously that you need to first kind of figure out what the tracks are that you put this plugin instances on. And if you have to add an additional instance later, what you have to do is you have to save your current state, and then you can load it back in either. But if you're not careful and you're just adding in an instance, essentially everything that you've said before is lost. So now we have it on the drum bus, essentially on this bed bus. So let's just see what happens. And in order to be better able to see what happens, let me just open up the renderer as well. And let's just solo the bed. Now, the easiest way to see that is by simply kind of changing the level here. So if I'm taking the output gain and kind of reducing that, you essentially see that it affects the left and right channel, but it doesn't affect any of the other channels. So if you put that plugin onto a track that is not mono or stereo, what it will do, it will affect the left and right channel and leave everything else untouched. So just be aware of that. In this particular case, what we could do is, because everything that we have here is really stereo, So what we could do, for example, is we could put a plugin. We don't really need to put the plugin on the objects. It could be really on any track. So what we can do instead is we can, let me just stop that one more time, and let's just remove that one. What we could do, for example, is we could put it on the drum track that essentially holds the kick. And let's just put it on there. And now the sixth is essentially the drum loop or the kick. And so let's just solo that. And what we could do, for example, is we could just do a sidechain with the kick. And let's fade in everything again. And then let's add the compressor. There we could do some sort of sidechaining. This is a kind of very traditional kind of sidechaining effect. So you can play around with these things, and actually quite powerful, very useful, and it's actually one of the things that surprises me that nobody has thought about so far, because it is a very simple idea, but it is really, really useful. So if you're into Dolby Atmos, this might really be a good addition to your arsenal. So what's my final verdict on that plugin? And I would say that's actually a very good addition. So if you're doing anything with Dolby Atmos, it probably is worth the 60 euros. I think it's actually really nice, especially since this is just the first release. It actually works really well, and it's very, very useful. Now, there are a couple of things that are a little bit odd at the moment still. First of all, it would be nice to have a little bit of a clearer picture which of the tracks is showing up on which spot in the track list. So currently you need to hover over the number in order to see what the track name is. It would also be nice if we could rearrange things. Currently that's fixed. Once essentially kind of the plugins pop up in the order they are instantiated, and if you have like 100 or 120 individual instances, it might get a little unwieldy to figure out exactly where which track is. And the other thing, it would be really nice if the plugin would be usable for bad tracks as well. Kind of I do understand there's a little bit of a complexity of implementing that, because the equalizer is fairly easy to implement on the multi-channel track. The compressor and the limiter are a little bit more challenging, but it would make this plugin so much more useful if we could also control the bad tracks with that plugin, and not only the object tracks. So my final verdict is a big thumbs up. I really like it. I also like the fact that it's not particularly expensive, and I encourage everybody to check that out. There's a free demo, and kind of let me know what you think of it. I would be interested if I'm the only one who likes this plugin, but if you find it useful, let me know in the comment section or on the Discord community. And with that being said, see you at the next video.